Hello everyone! Today's video is going to be an update on the 1/24 scale 70 Chevelle I built in a previous video. Although I'm really pleased overall with how this car turned out, I thought the front end could still use a little work. The front looks a little too low and there's too much camber for my liking, so I wanted to go ahead and address both of these and make the car look even better. Moving over to the workbench, I removed the body and inspected the front suspension. Right away I could tell the upper control arm mounting screws were loose, causing a lot of play and excess negative camber. Simply tightening up these screws did help, though I still wanted to reduce the negative camber even further. Make sure you don't tighten these screws too much, otherwise the upper control arm will not be able to move easily, and you want to avoid stripping the threads. We now offer a variety of different size parts for MC01 assemblies like what's on this chassis. These parts are all different lengths and can be swapped out with the stock parts to change the camber and toe. I'll be putting some links below in the description to these products. I'll be installing longer upper control arms along with slightly shorter tie rods. The process of installing these parts is very straightforward, but it can be tricky due to the small size. It's important to be careful when installing or removing these parts. With the longer upper control arms installed, the camber angle was now what I wanted. I didn't want to completely eliminate all of the negative camber, just reduce it some. I always make it a point to sand away any surface imperfections on the part left over from manufacturing. Although not always necessary on some parts, they can sometimes cause fitment issues or rub against other parts, which is why I always recommend sanding these imperfections and ensuring the part fits well. With the new upper control arms in place, I moved on to swapping out the tie rods. These shorter tie rods toe in the front wheels slightly. Next, I wanted to address the low front end. This is a result of how the body is positioned on the chassis and not with the suspension. The fix for this was very easy, as all that needed to be done was add some small spacers to the front side of the mount so it will pop up the front of the body. This is why, as I've said before when mounting bodies this way, it's better to mount the body lower than what you think you need, since you can always add spacers to lift the body up. Once the body mounts are glued, it's a lot harder to remove material to drop the body lower. The changes are very subtle, but there is definitely an improvement not only in the looks, but also with the function, as will be seen soon. The body is mounted a little crooked here, which causes each side to look different. Of course, I couldn't resist doing some driving. I only had a small amount of space to work with, so I set up a small autocross course. I only have enough cones for part of a track. I later came back with more cones that I had printed and finished the course, as you'll see later on. This ended up being a lot of fun and quite a challenge. The hard plastic tires on concrete and lock differential really made getting around the tight corners interesting. The first turn especially was challenging. I kept braking late, which put the car in a bad position for the next turn. I wanted to get close to the outside of the straight going into the first turn, but I also didn't want to risk driving into the expansion joint just to the right, since it's probably big enough to break some parts. This was a lot easier to do after I finished filming and could focus 100% on the car. However, no matter where I stood, it was still a challenge with the course being in all different directions, especially once I finished it. The lack of a differential causes the back to really push the front out and cause some understeer, which makes throttling out of a corner quickly require more than just mashing the trigger. The car will oversteer at times, but for most of what I filmed, I took it easy trying to get the hang of driving and not turning the Chevelle into a bowling ball. Here's a look at the completed course once I had more cones. As you've probably noticed, the car does bounce around a lot due to the rough surface of the concrete and the body being loosely mounted to the chassis. All the vibrations kept making the body mount screws loose. I don't really intend to drive this car on this type of surface regularly. However, it still might be fun to try and adjust the suspension to better absorb all the little bumps, and maybe allow some more body roll, as I think that's one thing this car really lacks when you compare the footage to a full-size car like this driving through an autocross course. As always, I'll be continuing to tinker and experiment with this car, but I really couldn't be happier with the performance. For me, it's a nice balance of speed and scale realism that's a lot of fun to drive. If you're interested in learning more about the Chevelle build and the products used, be sure to check out the links below in the description. Also, a huge thank you to everyone who has been supporting this channel on Patreon. If you're interested in getting yourself access to STL files, early access to videos, and help make more videos like this possible, you'll find a Patreon link in the description as well. That is all for today's video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.